All right. Chazal Baruch, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Chazal Baruch, thank you guys, everyone, for coming. Baruch Hashem, we are now pretty much, the summer has begun. Now it's the time of different nisyonot. Now is the times where things get challenging in different ways, maybe in ways that maybe we would not exactly expect. But in the Jewish calendar, as we know that holidays come at a certain time, Rosh Hashanah comes, Yom Kippur comes, Sukkot comes, Pesach, Shavuot, all of that is behind us and also ahead of us. But during the summer months, we have the main months that we deal with are the months of Tammuz and the months of Av, which are the months that we commemorate destruction. We remember the times when the Beit HaMikdash stood. We remember the times when we mourn their loss, that we've been without them, the first one, without the second one, and what they represented. For the nation to be without a temple where Hashem promised His Shekhinah, His presence would dwell in this world, to be without that is a national catastrophe. But in essence, after having so many years gone by, it's hard to resonate with that same pain. It's like, for example, let's say our parents, our mom, our dad, they tell us, oh, you know what happened 2,000 years ago? Your great-grandfather, great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, he broke his leg. So now we have to, now we remember every July 1st, we remember the fact that he broke his leg, and we have to mourn, and we have to remember, and we should never forget. And when it comes to a small tragedy, it's harder. A national tragedy is still difficult, because in 2026, who really connects to that? At least it's difficult. So in many ways, because our calendar is cyclical, because our calendar is not memorial, it's not meant to just remember something for one time, it's meant to live it every year like it's new, then Hashem is always teaching us that every year, whenever these events come, it's important to bring us into the frame of reference of what happened and what those months were. Now, we're a day before the beginning of the 3 weeks, before the beginning of the Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Tomorrow morning starts a fast. The 17th of Tammuz begins the first fast of the 3 weeks, and then we have Tisha B'Av. Now, I could speak about what these 3 weeks mean, what the destruction meant for the nation. I could speak about the Beis HaMikdash. But I want to go back a little bit even further, but very, very far, almost to the beginning of the Torah. Because I want to speak about Yaakov and Esav as something to throw a wrench into the whole thing. It says that Hashem gave auspices of certain months to certain people. So Yaakov Avinu, for example, got the months of Nisan, got the months of Iyar, got the months of Tevet, and so on and so forth. But there are 2 months out of the year that are sholet, that are in control of the Sar of Esav, that Esav himself is in control of Kivyachol, in a way, in a sense. And those 2 months that Esav got are the months of Tammuz and the months of Av, the 2 months that we're in, the months that we commemorate destruction, the months where the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Esav is sholet on this. And I want to go back to Parashat Toldot. I want to go back to Leah, because I want to understand exactly who these people were, and more so, who Esav was. Because I think, over the course of our childhood education, over the course of the stories that we've heard, I think that we've got it wrong. I think that perhaps the way we look at Esav, the way we at least accept Esav to be, I think maybe we're looking at it in a little bit of a different way. And I want to, B'ezrat Hashem, over the course of this year, bring that idea out and exactly what Esav and who Esav represented. Before we start with that, have you ever looked at yourself? Have you ever thought to yourself in the essence of your introspection, when you're trying to grow, when you're trying to overcome a certain challenge, you ever ask yourself, why am I like this? You ever look at somebody else who's succeeding and see, look how easy this guy has it, or seemingly how easy this person has it. This guy has it together, he's in the dating world, he's successful. He's in the business world, he's making money. He's overcoming struggle by struggle, and for me, things just seem much more difficult than for other people. You ever ask yourself, why am I here? You ever ask yourself, why do I have these struggles? Are they meant to bring me down? You come across your life and these things come up all the time. It's a very human way to feel. And it can be very daunting if you live in the idea that why do these things come up? It must be there to bring me down. Why is Hashem quote unquote punishing me? It seems like these challenges are tailor-made for me to fail. Kivyachol. I think through the exploration of who Esav was meant to be, I think we can begin to unpack the answer to these questions. But before we speak about Esav, we have to speak about Leah. Leah was one of the imahot. She was the sister of Rachel. The Torah says that ve'enei Leah rakot. The Leah's eyes, they were weak. Now, is that a compliment? What does it mean? Her eyes were tender. What?
It can be different. It's like doughy eyes.
They be doughy eyes. But is that a compliment? If I go to my wife and I come home, I go to my wife, I say, you have tender eyes. Or, you have doughy eyes. Would she be happy with that compliment?
Well, tender and doughy, yes, but not weak. I don't think weak would be the cute word.
I agree with you. It's just interesting because in the Torah, the Torah doesn't speak ill of the tzaddik's animals. It doesn't speak ill of anything that's related to a tzaddik, but by Leah, it says that her eyes were tender. It sounds almost like a blemish, right? Says the Gemara that one opinion is that, this actually was to say that her eyes were tender, and it was to say that this is what she went through. But another opinion, the Gemara says that it was actually a praise. And why were her eyes tender? Anyone know? Why were the eyes of Leah tender? Why?
Maybe it was an act of ahava,
That what?
Her eyes were like, she saw everyone with love and kindness.
And that's why they were tender?
Yeah.
So you know what the Torah teaches? Anyone have any other ideas why her eyes were tender? Leah's eyes were tender. Yes.
Well, if someone goes through anything, like they talk about people's eyes changing,
Mhm.
and just have this conversation
Okay.
about how you can really see like what people have gone through their eyes,
So you're saying she was going through something?
either going through or has gone through.
Or has gone through something?
Yeah.
Is it related to Esav?
It's related to Esav. So the Torah teaches that there was town gossip. There was Rivka, and she had two sons. Who were the sons of Rivka? Yaakov and Esav. Lavan had two daughters. Who were they? Rachel and Leah. So the oldest was meant to be destined for the oldest. That means Rachel was destined for Yaakov, the youngest, and the oldest Leah was destined to be married to Esav. So this was town gossip. This was, water cooler chat that she heard going around the town. That this is Lavan, this is Rivka, the daughters, the sons. This is the way it's going to be. So she goes around town, Leah, and she asks, "Can you tell me a little bit more about this guy Esav? This guy Esav, he's a hunter, he's a killer, he's a bad man. You want nothing to do with this guy. He's a cheater. You want nothing to do with this guy Esav." She says, "Okay, tell me about this guy Yaakov. How about Yaakov? Yaakov Ishtam or Shebo Halim. He's a tzaddik. He sits in the tents. He's learning Torah. He's doing great things. This is the guy that you want to be." And the gossip continues. It says, Leah is destined for who? This Rasha, seemingly Esav. And her sister, Rachel, is destined for Yaakov. So what is Leah during this entire process? She's crying. She's crying and she's crying and she's crying. She says, "I don't understand. Hashem, how could you set me up with this guy Esav? My sister's going to marry a tzaddik, Yaakov. I don't understand what's going on over here. Hashem is zovek zivugim. That means Hashem is constantly putting together matches. It's like someone coming to me and say, like, "Yeah, you have someone for me?" And I said, "You know what? I have someone great for you. He's a mafia guy. He's been in jail 3 times. The guy's a hard, cold killer." You're going to look at me and be like, "What are you trying to do here? What kind of shit are you trying to set up?"
Why some people are into that?
Fair. But I don't think that the person going to a rabbi to set up a shidduch is looking for the guy who sat in jail 3 times. I don't think. Unless you're on different platforms. But it's interesting that this was the town chatter, and this is what she took to heart. And it says the Gemara that she cried so much that her eyes, they became tender. Her eyelashes, they actually fell out. They were so sore from the fact of her crying and praying to Hashem. This can't be. I can't be matched with a guy like Esav. That her eyes became weak. They became tender. So one, you could say that it's out of scared, out of fear, but also you could say it's a praise because she wanted a tzaddik. But the question is, why did she believe it? If there's a rumor going around town, would you, yes, get in.
Can't this just be put in the category of Midrashim that paint Esav as this big villain? When you look through everywhere in the Torah and not one place in the actual text does it paint him as a villain.
Fair.
All of it is from the Midrashim.
Fair. So actually, I'm gonna touch on that because I'm not disputing. I'm not saying you're wrong. The Torah never says once that the Esav is a Rasha. The Chumash, meaning the Mikra, it doesn't call him a Rasha. But that's why I want to unpack exactly who he was and why was she crying. But let's start. Let's build it from the ground. We say, why did Leah accept this premise? She accepted this gossip. She said that, there's 2 sons of Lavan, there's two daughters of Rivka, the oldest to the oldest, the youngest to the youngest. That's an interesting premise. What was she so upset about? Hashem is not a bad shadchan. Hashem is the best shadchan in the world. So it must be that maybe we're misunderstanding something about why Hashem set up Leah and Esav. And we know a little bit more about Leah. So now I think it's time to unpack a little bit more about who Esav was. Let's look at Rivka's pregnancy. Who did Rivka have inside her bed? Twins. Who were they? Yaakov and Esav. But in the beginning, she didn't know. In the beginning, she didn't know it was 2 kids. She saw that every time she would pass a house of Kiddusha, the child would want to come out. Yitratzitzu. They would fight like they were running, right? He would go and he would pull towards the side of Kiddusha. And whenever the Rivka would go past a bit of Avodah Zarah, of idol worship, the same child would want to go and punch himself out also. So she was terribly distraught. She said, "I don't understand. If I'm going to have a child that's a tzaddik, let him be a perfect tzaddik. And if I'm going to have a child that's a rasha, let him be a perfect rasha. But now you're showing me, Hashem, that I'm going to have a child that's wishy-washy, a child that both wants Kiddusha and also wants Tumah. I'd rather not have that at all." It's interesting. The Torah teaches that Mashiach will come in a generation that's kulo zakai, that's completely righteous, or kolo chayav, or a generation that is completely guilty. That's interesting. The Rav Dessler says, I don't understand. Why don't you just have a generation that some are righteous, some are wicked? Why would Mashiach, I can understand that Mashiach is going to come in a generation where everyone's righteous. That I get. But why is it equally likely that Mashiach is going to come in a generation that everyone is completely guilty? Yeah.
Because
One second. Yeah, what are you going to say?
It's like almost like everyone will be one. There's no individuality. Like in like a perfect world, like we want everyone to be righteous.
Okay.
Or we want what is wicked if everyone's wicked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
So you're saying in a world where everyone's wicked, no one is wicked?
yeah.
That's interesting.
And
That's
when
an interesting
everyone's
thing.
good, no one is good either.
No one's good either.
There's nothing to strive for, so they need to bring something.
But it says in the generation of Noah, everyone was wicked. That Hashem destroyed the world. He didn't save the world because everyone was wicked. Now they became tzaddikim. They were wicked. They did the wrong things. But seemingly the Torah is teaching that if a generation is completely wicked, is as likely to bring Mashiach as a generation that is completely righteous. I want to say, not everyone's fully righteous, not everyone's fully wicked.
Yeah.
So how can it be? Yeah.
Can you say that like if everybody is like good or righteous, then Mashiach kind of comes and like, okay, good job guys, mission accomplished,
Uh-huh.
you know? And like if everybody's all completely evil and all completely bad, he comes and like, okay guys, like that's it, like you guys all failed the test.
But what's wrong with a person that's 50-50? What is the issue with that kind of person? What's the issue with that kind of generation? Andy, what do you say?
Your question.
So, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that kind of person, but kind of like to go what Stephen said, that's when Mashiach is needed. So when everybody is evil, those evil people, they need that light. They need somebody to like counter them, and that's when Mashiach comes. And when everybody is good, they need Mashiach to come and free them and come and take them to the world to come.
Uh-huh.
So in both of those, Mashiach is needed in a different way, in a way.
But you're not answering one point. No one's hitting on this one point, that what's wrong with the guy that's 50-50. Rivka, she was bothered by the fact that she had one child, supposedly, that was pulling towards Kiddusha and pulling towards Tum'ah. She said, I'd rather have a fully Rasha child.
We have bred away from that. We don't need that 50-50. We need to be either good or evil.
yeah, but
Does that make sense? Yeah.
not really, because love Yetzer Hara.
Okay.
So that's the other 50 part.
Now what?
Everyone has Kiddusha and everyone has a Yetzer Hara.
Right. So
That's the 50-50 part.
So-
Everyone has a piece of both.
So let me tell you what Rav Dessler
So
says.
So we tap into each person.
It's similar to what you're saying, but a little bit more fundamental. What Rav Dessler says in Michtav Meliyahu, he says something fascinating. He says when a generation is fully righteous, when you have a generation filled with tzaddikim, that makes sense. Mashiach is going to come to a generation that everyone deserves it. When everyone's doing the right thing, Mashiach is going to come, redeem them, come to Eretz Yisrael, bring the Beis HaMikdash. He's going to come down from the sky. The third one's going to be built. Kayam ad olam. Makes sense. But when you have a generation that's fully wicked, eventually when a person is fully wicked, when he goes completely all into his reshut, when he becomes a Rasha all the way, eventually this person's going to hit rock bottom. And when a person hits rock bottom, there's a greater chance that this person is going to come back and do teshuvah. Says Rav Dessler, if you have a guy that's 50-50, in the morning he can learn first Seder, he can go and daven 3 times in the minyan, but you know what? When the guy goes and sins, when he goes and does something he's not supposed to do, he'll whitewash his sins with the fact that I learned today, I prayed today, I'm also righteous. Okay, so I sinned, big deal. It's not a big deal. Look at what I am doing. Don't look at what I'm not doing. This guy that's 50-50, says Rav Dessler, is much more difficult to bring to tshuva than a guy who's either righteous or fully wicked.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Is this guy's sin the same weight as a regular sinner's sin, or is this guy's sin more bad?
It's not so much. That's not really the point. The point is that
from
the
that
point
perspective-
is that you can see how far a person can go
Yeah.
to lie to himself about his own actions. That I came to the class, I prayed 3 times a day. I'm coming giving charity. I'm eating kosher. I'm keeping Shabbos. Yeah, but I'm also going to the club on Friday nights. Okay, whatever, but I'm doing everything else. This guy that's 50-50 will always find a way to whitewash and justify his actions to himself. That's the issue. As Rivka was saying, I'd rather this child be a full Rasha, because there's a great chance that this guy is going to come back. Or a full tzaddik, he's a tzaddik. 50-50, I don't want that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you get rid of the Yetzer Hara, or what are you supposed to do that?
You're asking a different question.
So there's that piece that like
The Yetzer Hara is not there to bring us down. The Yetzer Hara is there to bring us up. It's not there to destroy us. That's what I'm going to get back to. So hold on. So Rivka ends up going to the yeshiva of Shem MiShmuel, and she goes to the rabbis and she says, "Listen, what's going on over here? I have this child that's pulling in one direction, pulling in the other direction. I don't like this. What's going on?" So he says, "No, Rivka, calm down. Everything's okay. You actually have two kids. You have one that's fully righteous, and you have one that's fully wicked. That's exactly what you have going on over here." So it seems like, what do we have over here? We have that Yaakov was born to be a tzaddik. Yaakov seemed to have been predestined to be a tzaddik, and Esav seemed to have been predestined to be a rasha. How do we know? When Esav was born, what did he look like? He was hairy. He was red.
hair.
Adom. What do we know from red? Why are stop signs red? It signifies warning. It signifies danger. It signifies blood, right? People get cautious. They get scared when they see the red color. It's atzor. It's stop, right? So Esav was already born in this fashion. So it seems like the only way to understand this extrapolation of the Torah, the Midrashim, that Shem and Ever are saying that you have one son that's meant to be a tzaddik, and you have one son that's meant to be a rasha. That's how we learn in kindergarten. My daughter comes home, and everything's black and white when you're 3, when you're 4, when you're 5. You realize, she comes home, she says, "Listen, there were 2 kids to Rivka. Yaakov was a tzaddik. He learned. He was in Beis Medrash, and Esav was a very bad man." It's very black and white. That's how kids learn. They're supposed to be black and white at that age, right? There's no nuance at that age. But how do we evolve from this understanding? Because is this assumption even true? Was Esav really meant to be this bad man? Was he meant to be wicked? It seemed like all the evidence is pointing that way, but is that really true?
Maybe somebody just didn't see his full potential.
No,
Perhaps,
we need to see the story from the whole perspective, and we need to see the arc.
Good. So let me build it. There's a fascinating Chazal in Shir Shirim Zuta that says something fascinating, and I'm going to speak it outside. He says that just like Hashem's name rested on Yaakov Avinu, Hashem's name also rested on Esav. They rested equally. They came from a tzedeket. Imahot, Rivka was a tzedeket. Just like the name of Hashem rested on one, the name of Hashem rested on the other. He goes so far as to say the kingship was supposed to come from Esav. If Esav did what he was supposed to do, kings, malachim, were supposed to come from Esav, and the kahuna, the kohanim, were supposed to come from Yaakov. That's why the first beracha was given to Esav. It was supposed to be for Esav at least. He was the bechor. He was the first child. So the main beracha of Yaakov Avinu was supposed to go. Of Yitzchak was supposed to go to Esav. He was the oldest, right? He saw that malachim is supposed to come from you. Greatness is supposed to come from you. This is what was supposed to happen. But what ended up happening? We saw that by the choices of their act, the choices that they made in life, they ended up being very, very different. And the Shem MiShmuel brings a very beautiful chidush to explain the way one needs to live life to understand what it means to grow and to become a tzaddik. The Torah teaches that one must be sur mira ve'aseh tov. Does anyone know what that means? Sur mira ve'aseh tov. What does sur mira mean? Abstain from evil, move away from evil, and aseh tov means do good. Says the Shem MiShmuel something fascinating, that these are 2 components of really one avodah of becoming a tzaddik. See, Yaakov Avinu, what was his nature? He was Yoshev Alim. His nature was to always go and learn. His nature was to go and to study, kivud aveim, to honor his parents. He had no nisyonot to go and kill, to go and steal, to go and do the things that he wasn't supposed to do. That was what he was supposed to do. So which part of the Chazal was he? He was the aseh tov. He was the part that his nature constantly pushed him into a position where there is no bad in my mind sight. There's nothing that I have a havamina to do, that maybe I should go out and slaughter this guy, kill Nebuchadnezzar in the field, and be with this wife, and be with that. No, it wasn't even a thought. Yaakov Avinu was aseh tov. But then there's another component. There's the sur mira. Sur mira means abstain from evil. But there's 2 ways to become a tzaddik. To become a tzaddik, there's one way where one goes and does. If I have a nature to go and do, then I'm complying with my nature. That's all good and well. But what if my nature is to go and cheat, and to steal, and to kill, and to pillage, and to control and dominate? What if that's my nature? Says the Torah, sur mira. Says the Shem MiShmuel, sur mira. Your avodah maybe not necessarily is to go and do good, but it's to stop yourself from doing the bad. The what?
What does it mean it's his nature?
The kids are born with natures. Kids are born with natures. You see some kids are more quiet, some kids are rowdy, some kids have more energy than others, some kids are studious, some kids are not. I'm not saying they're bound by it, but kids have natures. So Esav was born with the nature that he was Adom, he was red, he was hairy, he was fire. He always wanted to go out. He was a hunter. Tzad befiv. He would go and feed his father. This is who he was. But what was his avodah? What was the point of why Hashem gave him this nature? Not just to go and succumb himself to it, but his mission, his goal was sur mira. His mission was to say, the two-letter word, the one of the most difficult words for any adult person to say is the word no. Think about how difficult it is to say the word no. It's one of the smallest words in the English dictionary. But how difficult is it to say? You come into a barbecue and you see steaks and burgers and chicken, right? And you know you're on this diet and you know you have to stick to it. And how hard it is to say that word, to say no. Especially if you have a taiva for food. Or if you want to go out and you have a different taiva for food that you can't eat. How hard is it to say no? You know, it says the Gemara that a person who's really, really enticed to say Lashon Hara, evil speech, he wants to go and speak Lashon Hara, and he controls himself in that moment. It says the Gemara that a person who controls himself in that moment and doesn't speak that Lashon Hara, he's zocheh to light that the malachim are not zocheh in olam haba. That even the angels are not zocheh to see. If he goes and he controls and he abstains himself from just a little bit of Lashon Hara. Now, did Yaakov Avinu have this challenge? Was that his test? Was that what he was supposed to do? His nature was always to do good. That was how he was. You have a child, you have children sometimes, that they're just easy kids. They want to study, they want to learn, there's no challenges with them. But sometimes a challenge is when a kid that doesn't want to do any of that. So what do you do with a child like this? How do you mechanech this kind of person? You say, if you can't do good, if your nature is not to do good, can you abstain a little bit from the bad that you really do want to? Says the Shem MiShmuel, that Esav, if he was able to overcome his nature just a little bit, and identify that his mission to becoming a tzaddik was tsur mirah, says the Shem MiShmuel that Esav could have been bigger and greater than Yaakov Avinu himself. That he could have been greater than whatever Yaakov achieved, Esav could have achieved him greater. Why? Because Yaakov didn't have that challenge. Esav did have that challenge. It's like when you want to shoot a bow, the further back, the further taut you make that bow, the further the arrow flies. The further in the mud one starts, that challenge, it leaps him forward, not just to the same level that a tzaddik can, but even higher. So sometimes you see a guy, he can learn 10 hours a day. He can learn 12 hours a day. For some people, maybe that's their nature. But maybe that's not what your avodah is meant to be. Maybe your avodah is to go and abstain from the bad that you're already doing. Or maybe to learn a little bit more than you can. To do a little bit of aseh tov. But to take your challenge, to take your Yetzer Hara, to take whatever you think sticks you in the mud, overcome it. Because to recognize that our Yetzer Haras are not there to destroy us. They're only there to elevate us. What Esav didn't understand is that he saw his nature. When he sold his bechor, when he sold his blessings of what Yitzchak was supposed to give him, he said, this is who I am. Esav mina asui. It means I'm made. This is just how I am. But Hashem didn't give him this koach just for him to stay in the mud. He said, I'm giving you gvura. I'm giving you strength. When does a person need strength? Does a person need strength to do something good? It says, Ezehu gibor. Who's a gibor? What does the Mishnah say? Hakovesh et yitzro. Who's a strong man? Someone who overcomes his Yetzer. Because someone who constantly gives into his Yetzer, I'm going to eat whatever I want, I'm going to be with whoever I want, I'm going to go with whoever I want. Is this person really in control of his life? Is this a strong person?
No.
Or is this a person that just gives into every single inclination that he has in his mind? That's not what strength comes from. Strength comes from seeing all the options that are available to me, seeing that I can eat, I can go, I can do, I can be with, but I'm going to say no. That is where strength comes from. So the raya is like this. The proof is like this. If Hashem gave Esav this koach, this strength, it must be that he gave him the ability to overcome it also. But if we never make that choice, if we only recognize our challenges and the things that keep us in the mud as things that are meant to keep us down, then guess what? They always will. But if we recognize that we have the Yetzer Hara, not to keep us down, but to lift us up, and for us to say, you know what? If I can't do good in this point in my life, maybe I can at least abstain from a little bit of bad. That gvura that I show in my life at that point is what can elevate me to a much, much, much higher level than where I started. Shem MiShmuel teaches that if Esav had recognized this one lesson, he could have been greater in every single which way than Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov didn't have these nisyonot. If only Esav had recognized this. Now, what about his father? It says, the Torah commentaries, they speak very at length about Yitzchak. They say, what's going on over here? Yitzchak, he loved his son Esav. How can that be? You have a son, you have the perfect son, quote unquote, the guy who's always studying, he's always learning, he's always in the tents. But for some reason, Yitzchak favors Esav. How can that be? How can you have a guy like Yitzchak that's favoring a guy who's hunting, who's killing, who's stealing, seemingly everything contrary to the way we're supposed to learn to be a righteous person? Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. It's the child you want to help more. The child who you see needs the support versus the child who you see is accomplished and gets things done.
And therefore you love him more?
You don't love him more, but you might
You-
show that attention.
You favor him more. That's what's
I
happening.
think no.
I don't think it's favoriting.
You
I
invest
think
in
it's
the
more-
child more, then you love him more. If you
Right.
No,
invest-
I think
Uh-huh. What is it? I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
you worry more.
You worry more.
You worry more.
I'm not so sure if Yitzchak were worried. Let's go back a couple
No, what I
generations.
mean is like the child who's the quote unquote problem child.
Yeah.
You're more. You don't know how it's gonna go. With one kid, you know how it's gonna
Go back a couple generations. What was Abraham's midah? Yeah.
I can answer that too.
Okay. What was Abraham's midah?
Chesed.
Chesed, right? What does that mean? Abraham and his wife, they were always bale chesed. They went out, they brought people in, they brought in guests, they tried to feed, they tried to grow, they tried to makarab. This is who they were. Now his son was Yitzchak. What was Yitzchak's midah? What was it? Gvura. Now we said Gvura is what? Gvura is strength, right? It means it comes to Gever. Ze Gever. What does it mean, Ze Gever? Guy's a strong guy, right? So Yitzchak was almost the exact opposite of Abraham. Yitzchak was the kind of guy that said, you want to go and sacrifice me as a korban? No problem. Tie me up, but tie me tight. When you put the ropes around me, make sure I don't move. Lest I, God forbid, I hurt you, Abraham. Yitzchak was Gvura. Now you have Yitzchak's kids. Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, what was his midah? Yaakov was Tiferet. He was also a good guy. He sat, he was calm, he was a learner. But what about Esav? Esav was also Gvura. Esav was a hunter. He was a guy that wanted to go and accomplish and dominate and gain power in every single way that he can. So you see, it says the Zohar, the reason that Yitzchak had such a favoritism, in a way, towards Esav, is because it's min bimino. When you have someone that has similar interests. For example, if I like to go out to eat, right, and I want to go out with a friend, but my friend, he doesn't go out to eat, he's a vegetarian, and the guy doesn't eat anything, it's going to be a little bit difficult to connect. It's going to be a little bit difficult to go out to eat. You're not going to have so much fun. But if you have a father, and the son comes out in many ways like the father himself, then the father wants to be with that son. Yitzchak saw in Esav that he has this level of gura, because he's min bimino. He said, Esav, I knew that you have this midot. I know that you have this gvura within you. You have this koach, you have the strength to go and build and dominate and be the best version of yourself. So do I. But Esav dropped the ball. Because he saw that he had these strengths. He saw that he was able to go and overcome if he chose to. But he chose opposite. He dropped the ball. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sell the Bechor because to me it's worth nothing. My nature is what my nature is, and this is the way it ought to be. So now we go back to Leah. Leah was crying because she said, don't put me with Esav. Don't put me with this guy. What did she see? She saw a Rasha? She saw a wicked guy? Why would Hashem put them together? And the answer is like this. Rachel also is chesed. Rachel, you see, the first time we introduced her in the Torah, she's feeding the camel, she's feeding the animals. You see, she wants to go out, she wants to help. Just like Yaakov, they're min bimino. Leah and Esav are also from the same cut of stone. They're from the same level of gvura. How do we know? Esav was someone that always tried to go and to accomplish and Sur Mirah, that was his avodah. His avodah was to go and push away the bad. Sur Mirah, that was what his tikkun was meant to be. And what did Leah do? She davened so hard to Hashem to push me away from the bad. Push me away from Esav. Leah came from the same cut of stone of Sur Mirah. From the same tikkun that Esav was supposed to accomplish. This was the point that Leah was all supposed to be from. See, when Hashem put them together, He put them together for a reason. Leah was a tzedekah, she made the right choices. Esav also had those same abilities to make those choices. Esav was cut from the same stone as Leah was. If he had chosen differently, with the same kochot that he had, with the same abilities that he had, if he had just chosen a little bit differently, he would have been together with Leah. They would have made the perfect union. It's not that Hashem made a mistake. It's that Esav dropped the ball. It's that Esav saw his difficulties, his nature, and he said, this is what's meant to keep me down instead of what's meant to lift me up. You know, the lesson, especially as we go into these months of Tammuz and Av, it's a time of recognizing there was a destruction that happened nationally. There was a destruction, there's a Churban, there's a Beis HaMikdash. And it comes many times to recognize what is it within me that caused my own destruction, that contributes a little bit to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Because it says, for every generation that the Beis HaMikdash is not here, it's as though we are destroying it every single generation. So it must be that if we don't have a Beis HaMikdash in 2026, it must be that we're complicit in exactly the same affairs that they did back then that caused the destruction in the first place. And so when it comes time to these months, and we're entering the 3 weeks, Shavah Asar B'Tammuz, and we recognize the breach of the walls are coming down. What is it within me that I'm constantly still breaking? Am I looking at my faults as those that are trying to keep me down? Or can I look at them with a little bit of a different perspective and say, even though I'm in the mud, even though it's hard for me, even though I have these challenges, maybe my avodah is not aseh tov, maybe it's sur merah. And maybe throughout these months, Av and Tammuz, instead of looking at the negative, instead of looking at the destruction, I can say, how can I focus on the building? How can I focus on the parts of myself that, even though they are mitzad Yetzer, even though they are mitzad Hara, maybe those are the very vehicles that I can use to elevate me higher than I ever thought I could be. And with this, I want to end with a story. Anyone ever heard of Rav Dessler? Rav Dessler was a fascinating, he was a rabbi, he was a doctor, mental health specialist, a very eclectic, very eclectic rabbi. And one time, Rav Dessler, he was speaking to a group of inmates. And he starts off the speech, he says, he's speaking to these guys that are incarcerated already for many years. He says, 68% of those who are incarcerated in prison end up in prison back again when they're released in 2 years. A full 77% of those who come out of prison, they come back in 3. And he's speaking to these people and he's saying, why is it that you chose this life? Why is it that you like being in here? You like being served 3 square meals? You like the fact that you have to stand behind bars, live your life to the way somebody else wants you to live it? Is this the life that you want? Is this the life that you really chose? He says that I can see in you an ability to go and choose better. That you have an ability to go and become the best versions of yourself. You don't need to be here. And all the inmates, they begin to cry. They say, finally somebody sees me for who I am. Finally somebody sees potential in that no one else was able to see before. But there's one guy, one of the incarcerated, one of the people that was in prison. He says, Rabbi, what you're saying is not true. What you're saying is a load of baloney. And he did not use the word baloney. He said, you don't know my life. You don't know what I went through. You don't know what I had to do to get to where I am. And what you're saying is complete and utter fiction. He says, okay, Rabbi Dessler says, okay, you know what? This seems to be a very sensitive matter. Maybe we'll speak after. So he goes to the guy, he says, listen, what's your name? He says, my name is Josh. He says, okay, what's going on? Tell me your story. He says, Rabbi, I'll tell you my full story. He said, at 10 years old, my mother was a drug addict. My father was absent. Our home never had any food. We had no shelter. There was nothing else that I could call my home aside from the 4 walls that maybe protected us from the rain once in a while. After a while, we used to go and scour for food from the neighbors, from the community shelter, from the schools. And we started picking sandwiches. We started getting whatever we could. The neighbors, they ended up calling social services on me and my sister, and they sent us into a home. At 10 years old, we were in this new orphanage home, where they also had 5 kids and 7 more children that they had adopted, quote unquote, but it was only to collect the check. He said they couldn't care less about us. He said they never fed us, they never got us clothes, and they treated us miserably. He said I was just one more ugly mouth that they needed to feed. He said, and it came time that I got very hungry. It was very hard to live like this. I couldn't eat. They weren't giving us food. So I would go, when I would send to the community schools, I would go and look into my friends' bags, and I would take a sandwich, and I would take a tuna can, and I started stealing. He said at the age of 10, I became a thief. And these problems, they began to escalate. And the principal, he called my parents, my foster parents, and he said at that moment, that night when I came home, I got the beating of my life. My foster father, beat me within an inch of my life. He said at that point, I knew that I couldn't live there anymore. He said, I got all the things that I could, whatever things that I could call my own. I packed a small bag and I ran away. And he said, I lived on the streets. From 10 years old, I was living on the streets. And I began to steal more and more. And he said, Rabbi, I got very good. He said, it went from sandwiches, it went from tuna cans, to went to jewelry, to watches, to rings. I began thrifting. I was in jail 3 times. He said, for everything that I tried to do just to stay alive. He said, this is the circumstance that I was dealt. He said, you think I chose this life? You think I chose to be in the position that I am? That you're here lecturing me that this is what I want, what I don't want? This is where I am. And Rav Dessler says, but let me tell you something. He says, can you think back to that last diamond that you stole? That last diamond that you held in your hands, that you put in your pocket? And he gets a little embarrassed, he gets a little red. He says, yeah, I remember. He says, do you know how that diamond was mined? He said, you had some people, some very motivated people that crawl into the mines in the black soot, and they find this one big clump of black rock. And they take this black rock that's been formed under pressure, and they begin to clean it, and they begin to chip at it, and they begin to carve it, and they begin to form it into something that is as precious as can be, a gemstone that we call today a diamond. So he's like, so you're right. If I had taken that raw form, that rock, that black stone, it might have been bigger in its raw form, but it's useless in that state. Maybe all one needs is a little bit of a cut, a little bit of a tzom, a little bit of a fast, a little bit of tefillah, a little bit of a shaping of who you are, and then you reveal within you that you actually are the diamond that's within the suit itself. Maybe all you are right now is just that unformed piece of pressure. But with a little bit of work, a little bit of cutting, a little bit of pain, maybe you can become that diamond too. He takes the Musar to heart. He says, no one's ever really spoken to me like this. He says, Rabbi, I wanna heed your advice. And that's what he does. He goes, he seeks counsel from the rabbi, and the rabbi gets him a job in a halfway house. He moves out of the prison, he goes to the halfway house, and he gets a job. And his job was to go and to move people out of homes. He got a truck, he used to drive a truck, and he would go move couches, move furniture, whatever he needed to go. And so one day, he gets a call from the supervisor of the halfway house, and he said, listen, Josh, there was just an inheritance, the grandmother died, and they want us to go and to see, maybe we can use some of the furniture from the halfway house. Go check it out, go see what they have. And he says, okay, no problem. He gets into the truck, he sees what's over there, and he drives maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes to the house that the original landowner had passed away in. He goes in and he sees that everything is very old. Everything's decrepit. He said the whole place smells like mothballs. The whole place nothing is worth salvaging. He said clearly they just called the halfway house because they just wanted a free move. They wanted someone that could just go and empty the apartment so they can go and they can leave and they can go and make a profit, whatever they needed to do. He calls back the supervisor and he says, listen, there's nothing here that's worth taking. He says, you have a couch that's barely on 4 legs, a table that's broken. There's nothing here worth taking. She says, listen, Josh, just take something. Take a table, take a couch, just to show that we made a promise. This is our word. When we say a word, this is what we do. He says, what, maybe we could take the couch. So he goes and he takes the couch. He lugs it out of the apartment himself. He pushes it down the hallway, turns the corner, brings it down the stairs, loads it into his truck. And as he's coming down the stairs, he hears from the corner, from the edge of his ear, he hears boing. And what happened was the spring inside the couch, through all the motions, through all the ruckus of the moving and the tumult of the moving, a spring came up from the middle of the couch. And he said, great. Even the couch that I wanted to bring, you see that even this is not even worth taking. But he notices that there's a little bit something strange within that spring. He goes and he looks inside the spring and he sees an envelope. And he opens the envelope and he sees it's money. And it's hundreds. And he starts counting. 1, 2, 3. $3,200 he found inside this couch. And his past, it begins to come back to him. He says, listen, all my life I stole. All my life, this is who I was. He thinks to himself what to do, what not to do. He takes the envelope, closes it up, and he puts it into his pocket. And he goes and he continues taking the couch, loads it into the truck, and he goes back to the halfway house. He says, listen, this is all I could salvage. This is all I could get. And he says, Josh, you did such a great job. He says, I know that you went to this apartment. There was nothing worth taking. But when we make a word, when we say that we're going to do something, even when it's hard, even when you have to fight every ounce of your fiber to go and do it, that's what we do because we do the right thing. And now this money's burning a hole in his pocket. He says, I have to tell you. So he pulls out the pocket, he pulls out the cash, and he says, oh, by the way, I also found this money in the couch. Maybe we should return it to the family, to the inheritors, to whoever deserves it, whoever owns it, whoever has the right to the money. And he gives it to the supervisor. And she starts counting it, $3,200. Josh, and you chose to come forward with this, and you told us, and you were honest about it. She said, this is amazing, coming from where you came from, to overcome this nisayon, this is incredible. So she says, I have to go and tell Rabbi Twersky. She goes and calls Rabbi Twersky. She says, Rabbi, I have to tell you what your protege, what he did. And she tells him the whole story. And he comes down to the halfway house, gives Josh a big, big hug. And he looks him in the eyes and he says, I think we finally polished our diamond. He says, I think you finally overcame it. See, when we look at our challenges...
He donated the sign.
Huh?
He donated the sign.
And he donated the sign. You see, when we look at our challenges, when we look at the things that we struggle with, and we see them as things that keep us down, and we say, this person has it easy, this person has an easier time than me. For me, I struggle, they don't. For me, it's hard and they don't. But if we look at those challenges and say that maybe that once I develop myself a little bit more, tsur mera, a little bit abstention from doing bad, a little bit more of aseh tov, maybe I can develop myself such that those challenges are not what anchor me down, but those challenges are what spring me forward. In these months where nisyonot are almost impossible, the summer months, they're hard. It's hard to get up. It's hard to go to shul. It's hard to keep shmirat ha'einayim. It's hard to look at the things that you're not supposed to look at. Abstain from looking at things that you're not supposed to look at. These months, they come with challenges. That's why they're sholet by Esav. Esav controls Tammuz and Av because these months are filled with challenges. But if we look at the Shem MiShmuel and we see what Esav was meant to be, he was meant to be great. He was meant to marry Leah. It was a match made in heaven. But he chose wrong. We can then begin to recognize that maybe these challenges that we know we're going to go through in the summer months of Tammuz and Av, maybe they're not meant to break us. Maybe they're dafka meant to build us. That just before we come to Rosh Hashanah, before we come to Kippur, that these months of challenges, we say, these are all opportunities. Every time I struggle, chef's kiss. Every time I'm struggling, I can't do something, I say, Baruch Hashem for this challenge. Because I know that maybe if I develop the strength to overcome it, I develop the strength to go one step more than I thought I could, I become the best version of myself. To be metaken what Esav couldn't, to make the choices that Esav didn't. We recognize that maybe these months are really filled with diamonds. They're filled with opportunities, but only if we change our perspective on them. That as these 3 weeks go on, you should have an easy fast and recognize that these 3 weeks, it's not just a concentration and a focus on destruction, but it's a concentration on rebuilding. It's a concentration on saying that afal pichen, there's challenges, those challenges are there for me to grow. Hazak Baruch. Right. Thank you everybody. Hazak Baruch. What?